On December 30th, 2006, the world witnessed the dramatic end of one of the most infamous leaders in modern history. Saddam Hussein, the former president of Iraq, met his fate on the gallows, but it wasn't the act of execution itself that sent shockwaves around the globe. It was what he said just moments before. The final moments of a man who ruled with absolute authority were captured in chilling detail, revealing more than anyone expected. But what did Saddam say that left such a lasting impression? Why do his last words still ignite debate, stirring both anger and fascination? Join us as we uncover the story behind Saddam Hussein's last moments, exploring what they reveal about the man and his turbulent legacy. Let's get started. Saddam Hussein's rise to power. Saddam Hussein was one of the most divisive personalities of the 20th century. Born in 1937 in the small village of Al-Ajwa near Tikrit, Saddam grew up in a politically volatile Iraq. His early years were marked by hardship and an environment of violence, which shaped his worldview and fueled his ambitions. In his early 20s, Saddam joined the Ba'ath Party, a nationalist organization with the goal of unifying Arab nations under socialism. His loyalty to the party and penchant for political maneuvering quickly caught the attention of party leaders. By the late 1960s, Saddam had positioned himself as a key figure in the Ba'athist coup that overthrew Iraq's government. Once the Ba'ath Party seized power, he began consolidating his influence within the administration. In 1979, Saddam officially became president following the resignation of Ahmed Hassan al-Bakr under suspicious circumstances. This transition was marked by an infamous meeting where Saddam ordered the execution of party members he accused of disloyalty, cementing his authority and instilling fear. Significant changes occurred in Iraq under Saddam's rule. He made significant investments in healthcare, education, and infrastructure, making Iraq one of the most advanced countries in the region. But his assertive foreign policy characterized his reign. The 8-year brutal Iran-Iraq War of the 1980s destroyed both countries, but enhanced Saddam's reputation as an advocate of Arab nationalism. His 1990 invasion of Kuwait sparked global indignation and sparked the Gulf War, which pitted Iraq against a coalition led by the United States. Saddam used ruthless crackdowns on dissent and propaganda to stay in power in spite of his military defeats. Because he fluctuated between collaboration and disobedience based on Iraq's requirements, his ties with international powers were characterized by mistrust and strategic manipulation. Saddam's reign shaped Iraq's future for many years by combining ambition, ruthlessness, and strategic acumen. The fall of Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein's downfall officially began when a coalition led by the United States and the United Kingdom launched a full-scale invasion of Iraq in March 2003. Assertions that Saddam's regime had WMDs and had connections to terrorist organizations served as justification for the war. However, these assertions were later hotly contested. Iraqi defenses were overwhelmed as the invasion progressed quickly. Saddam tried to mobilize his army, but the coalition's superior firepower and coordination caused the Iraqi military to disintegrate. By April, Saddam's rule over the nation had been essentially overthrown, and Baghdad had fallen. After the fall of Baghdad, Saddam went into hiding, marking the beginning of an intense and highly publicized manhunt. The search for Iraq's former leader became a priority for the coalition forces, who scoured the country using intelligence and tips from captured members of Saddam's inner circle. These efforts finally bore fruit in December 2003, when a covert operation led U.S. forces to a remote farmhouse near Saddam's hometown of Tikrit. Hidden in a small underground bunker, Saddam was discovered in a spider hole, disheveled and unarmed. The moment marked a dramatic fall from the once powerful figure who had ruled Iraq with an iron fist. Soldiers discovered $750,000 in cash, a gun, and a pistol next to him. Saddam resisted being questioned about his acts as the leader of Iraq, even after being captured. As Iraq struggled with a political vacuum and sectarian violence, his capture marked a turning point in the post-invasion instability, but also brought out new difficulties. The end of Saddam's rule not only signaled the collapse of one of the Middle East's most notorious regimes, but also set the stage for years of instability in Iraq. His capture was a milestone, but it left behind a fractured nation and an uncertain future. The trial. Saddam Hussein's trial was as controversial as it was historic. Conducted by the Iraqi Special Tribunal beginning in 2004, the proceedings aimed to hold the former leader accountable for his actions during his 24-year rule. Among the charges were crimes against humanity, including his role in the massacre of 148 Shiites in the town of Dujail following an assassination attempt in 1982, as well as his brutal campaigns against the Kurds in the 1980s. These accusations painted a grim picture of a leader whose rule was defined by oppression and violence. From the beginning, Saddam Hussein's trial was a high-stakes, contentious, and chaotic political play rather than a quest for justice. The US-backed Iraqi court was criticized for being too biased to render a just decision. Suspicions were raised that the trial was more about securing the new regime's power than providing fair justice because the Iraqi government was adamant about keeping the proceedings domestic and disregarded calls to engage an international criminal court. The trial was beset by security concerns at every stage, as if the atmosphere in the courtroom wasn't enough. The entire procedure was tainted by the kidnapping and murder of several members of Saddam's legal team. Saddam was a disruptive influence inside the courtroom, adamantly claiming he was still the legitimate leader of Iraq and contesting the legitimacy of the court. His unrelenting theatrics and fiery outbursts made the trial a spectacle, infuriating onlookers and further undermining its legitimacy. For some Iraqis, it was a long overdue reckoning, a moment of justice for the countless victims of Saddam's brutal rule. For others, it felt like a hollow, politically charged show trial. Globally, human rights groups slammed the court for failing to meet international standards of fairness, arguing that the chaotic proceedings only deepened Iraq's post-dictatorship wounds. When Saddam was found guilty and sentenced to death in 2006, the verdict marked the end of an era, but not the end of the debate. The trial remains a lightning rod for discussion, remembered for its flaws and drama. It stands as a stark reminder of how challenging it is to pursue justice in a nation still scarred by dictatorship and war. Execution Day. The morning of December 30th, 2006 marked the end of an era as Saddam Hussein was led to his execution. Held in a makeshift execution chamber within an Iraqi military base in Baghdad, the atmosphere was anything but somber. The setting was crude, hastily prepared, and far from the dignified legal proceedings expected for the conclusion of a trial that had gripped the world. As Saddam, dressed in a black coat over a traditional white dishdasha, entered the chamber, he carried himself with a calm defiance that contrasted sharply with the chaotic scene around him. The execution was meant to be a private, orderly affair. However, the presence of a jeering crowd, including guards and officials, quickly turned it into a chaotic spectacle. Chants of Muqtada, Muqtada, referencing the Shiite cleric Muqtada al-Sadr, rang through the room, exposing the deep sectarian divides that had come to define post-Saddam Iraq. Saddam responded with his characteristic defiance, refusing a hood and exchanging barbs with the crowd. His final words were a declaration of faith, reciting the Shahada, "There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger." As he recited the Shahada, "There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger," Saddam turned to his faith, framing his final moments as an act of submission to God's will. To his supporters, it was a display of courage and unshakable conviction, a leader unbroken even in the face of death. To his detractors, it was a hollow performance, the final act of a man responsible for untold suffering. An unapproved mobile phone recording of the incident, which included the disparaging remarks directed against Saddam, was made when the noose was being put around his neck. The video, which was ultimately made public, captured the events leading up to his hanging and demonstrated how intensely personal and vindictive the incident was. In contrast, the chaos and anxiety that characterized the last moments were absent from the official government tape, which ended immediately before the execution. Saddam's life ended quickly when the trapdoor was opened, but the debate about his execution only grew more heated. Many felt that the intended message of justice and accountability was compromised by the unapproved recording and the actions of those in attendance. Rather, it seemed to be a retaliatory murder, glaringly exposing the differences within Iraq. The fallout, reactions, and controversies. Saddam Hussein's execution on December 30, 2006 was more than just the demise of a despot. It was a moment that sparked global outrage, controversy, and discussion. The responses in Iraq were as polarized as the country itself. Saddam's death was chaotic and almost theatrical, which added to the sadness of many in Sunni-dominated areas who saw him as a martyr and a defiant symbol of resistance against foreign occupation. Celebrations broke out in areas with a Shiite majority as people celebrated what they perceived to be long overdue justice for decades of brutality and persecution. Globally, the execution drew sharp criticism for its timing, falling on the Islamic holiday of Eid al-Adha, and for the shambolic way it was handled. What was intended to be a solemn conclusion to a historic trial instead became a grim spectacle that raised questions about Iraq's fragile government and its ability to deliver justice with dignity. When world leaders voiced their opinions, the responses were far from consistent. Although it didn't conceal its discomfort, the United States, which had been instrumental in Saddam's detention and trial, formally backed the death. Many people believed that the execution had hurt rather than helped Iraq's reputation as a young democracy. Saddam's death brought to light the severe divisions that still existed in the nation, rather than bringing it together, establishing a legacy of debate that would persist long after his passing. So, what do you think about Saddam Hussein's final moments and their lasting impact? Do his last words change the way you view his legacy? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this video interesting, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more intriguing stories like this. Until next time, stay curious.